Okay, so we are continuing on with our talk about ecosystems and the communities of living things that exist within them. And a really important topic is how do you get an ecosystem in the first place? Where do they come from? How do they arise? So that's what this little podcast is about, is something called ecological succession. And that is simply how ecosystems develop over time in a given place, okay? So ecological succession is simply the series of predictable changes. In other words, we see these patterns occur over and over again that occur in a community of living things over time, okay? Basically, what you see over time in a given environment is that one community of organisms is slowly replaced by a different community as conditions in the ecosystem change, until you get to this kind of very stable top level, if you will, community where things are pretty stable, and the ecosystem pretty much stays like that until something catastrophic happens that causes it to change. Ecological succession typically, like most things, goes from simple to complex. So you'll have a very simple set of organisms begin this journey, this ecosystem, and then slowly over time they are replaced by other organisms as the community becomes increasingly complex. So let's put this into kind of a framework. There are two major types of ecological succession, okay? Primary and secondary, and we'll talk about primary first. So primary succession is succession that occurs in an area that has never had life on it before, okay? So a volcanic island, you are out in the ocean and you see boiling up out of the water rock, molten rock, and the next thing you know, there's an actual island in front of you. The island is barren of life. No life has existed on it. It is newly formed, okay? So in order for succession then to get started, something has to decide, quote unquote, to live there, okay? Pioneer species are the organisms that are the first to colonize some non-living surface, usually barren rock. A great example of a pioneer species, and one that you should really know, is lichen. Now, you've seen lichen. We have it around here. It often grows on actually the bark of trees around here, but also on bricks near your house, perhaps, or whatever. And this is some lichen. Obviously, this is a big rock, and it's got lichen growing all over it, but here's a really nice sample right here. Lichen is actually a symbiotic relationship, so it's two species of organisms, and it's a mutualistic symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae. So again, they're both benefiting. The benefit to the fungus is that the algae can do photosynthesis, and so the fungus are going to get some food benefit from the algae living within them. And of course, the algae get the benefit of having a nice place to live inside the fungal tissue. It's moist, it's protected, and so on. So the fungus gets food, the algae gets a place to live. They're great. And what's more is they're a very self-sufficient organism, okay? That's why they're such good pioneer species. They can live just clinging to the side of this rock. They don't require a whole lot of stuff from their environment. So that's why they are really good pioneer organisms. They can just need a kind of a place to stick, and they're good to go, okay? Now, one thing they do while they're sticking to that rock is slowly they will begin to break down the rock. And that's critical, because once we start breaking down rock, soil can start to form. As the lichen die, bits of them get meshed in with the bits of broken rock, and we get these beginnings of soil, okay? So we are now, at this point, preparing the environment for other living things to live there, okay? So this is kind of how primary succession, or any succession, works. You have organisms that are living there because they can, but they are altering the environment as they live, and thus making the environment more suitable for other things to come in and live, and perhaps even outcompete these guys eventually. Okay? So, these are our very first steps then in primary succession. We get some barren rock, we get some lichen colonizing on the rock surface, and then we get these beginnings of soil, and then perhaps little tiny small grass plants, or these look almost like little ferns, but I don't know that they are. But little tiny plants can come and live in these little crevices that might have these first beginnings of soil. And then we start to break the rock down a little more, create a little more soil as the plant bodies and the rock kind of smush together as they weather and erode and so on. So this might be a place where some primary succession is occurring. Now this diagram, again, this is over time. All right, time is going this way. All right, so this is not we're taking a hike in the woods and I'm going from rock into trees. This is this plot of land at the beginning, and this is the same plot of land as time has gone on. So in primary succession, we are starting with little more than rock. And then we get our pioneer species coming in and creating some soil for us so that small grasses and things can come in and start to take root and break down the rock even more. And then we get smaller shrub-like plants that are able to come in because there's a little more soil available, and of course they are going to dig into the rock and the soil and so on even more and create better conditions so that they ultimately get replaced by perhaps some trees, and the trees are going to shade out what's down here, these small shrubs and so on. So actually these small shrubs and small grasses kind of ultimately are going to lose this competition because the trees, there's enough soil there to support tree life, and so they begin to grow. And then we get even larger, taller trees still, okay, different kinds of trees. All right, now, something just came in my head, but it left. Maybe it will come back. All right, so again, in words, we are looking at primary succession rock. Lichen on the rock creates a little bit of soil, small plants. We hadn't really talked about how animals, but of course animals, I know what I forgot. The question might be, how do these pioneer species get here in the first place? We've got this barren rock island. How do these pioneer species, how do these grasses, shrubs, trees, how do they get there? Wind is great at blowing spores of fungus spores and things like that around, and that's certainly one way that pioneer species, particularly lichen, can get from one place to another. Small grasses, little seeds, again, can be wind blown, or they can be carried and dropped by animals. As animals fly, obviously birds, perhaps bats fly overhead, things like that. Seeds can even float in water and be washed ashore and take root and then be distributed on the island over time as plants grow from these washed ashore seeds. So all kinds of ways for things to get there. And of course, small animals, once you have a small plant community, small animals can live there. And again, how do they get there? They can float on things. If you're a bird, you can easily fly. So there are ways. Once we have more soil, we have larger plants, and of course larger plants can support larger animals. Okay? All right, secondary succession then is succession in an area that has had life in the past, but that life was mostly removed. For example, if you plow down a field or cut down a bunch of trees to create a field, you have got the beginnings of secondary succession. Okay? Secondary succession is usually much quicker than primary succession. Why? If you look here, you see we've cut down on these trees, but we haven't taken every single living thing out of this environment. We aren't starting from nothing but rock. We have soil that's huge. We don't have to work to create soil that's already there. We probably have seeds and roots and things in the soil. So, seeds present, and so I should have up here, soil is present. That's huge, because in primary succession you have to go through the process of creating that. Roots and stumps left behind can sprout and regenerate. The soil that is there is also not just any soil. It is usually pretty fertile because there's living stuff left in it. So finally, either with primary succession or secondary succession, you get what is called a climax community, and that is the most stable environment that a given climate can support. So the most stable group of organisms that a given climate can support. The end result of succession is a climax community. Now, some environments, due to their climate, can support huge amounts of life. They have elaborate climax communities. Think of a tropical rainforest. Many more are limited in the climax communities they can support because it's either very cold or there's not much moisture or whatever. So in our area, the climax community here is a temperate deciduous forest. That's just if we plowed down an area and let stuff just naturally grow back over years and years and years, eventually a forest would be in that area. But it would not ever become a tropical rainforest because our climate would not support that. It also wouldn't become a desert because our climate has too much moisture for that, and so organisms would grow that you wouldn't see in a desert. So there's a great climax community, ours, a deciduous forest. There is a beach climax community there. Tundra, hope you would recognize that. There's a desert, and they all look very different. Now, if the climate changes, then the type of climax community in this area could be very different. But if the climate stays as it is in these different places, then this climax community would be stable. Okay? Now, stable, yes, unless something catastrophic happens. Ecosystems usually recover from natural disturbances. If there is a forest fire, an ecosystem usually can recover from that. And however, if we keep in a particular ecosystem, keep burning it down or keep harvesting things out of it, there are times when the disturbance may be too much for the ecosystem to recover from. For example, if you strip all the nutrients out of the soil, then it may be really difficult for that ecosystem to recover. It may recover, but it may take a very long time, because when you talk about having to kind of recreate soil, that is a lengthy process. So it is not necessarily guaranteed that a disturbed ecosystem will recover to its same climax community. It may never have the nutrient capacity, or the living things that were once there may be exterminated, and we're just not going to get them back because there's nowhere to get them from. So that's it for succession, both primary and secondary. Please make sure you know that. That's a really important thing, and it's asked about with some frequency. All right, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next podcast. Take care.